tough to stop. I think that's what that's what the offense does. Trying to
What happens when the perfect formula for an NBA super team turns into a recipe for disaster? The Phoenix Suns thought they had cracked the code with their so-called Big Three, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. But instead of dominance, this team is now the poster child for everything wrong with the modern NBA. Overhyped? Check. Poor chemistry? Double check. And worst of all, a financial mess that's impossible to fix. Buckle up as we dissect what might just be the biggest flop in NBA history. Let's rewind to the summer when Phoenix fans were over the moon. The Suns had just added Bradley Beal to their roster, creating a lineup that was supposed to be unstoppable. On paper, it looked like a cheat code. Booker, the scoring machine. Durant, the all-time great. Beal, the crafty sharpshooter. Pundits were calling it the new era of super teams. But here's the kicker. No one stopped to ask, does this actually make sense? The reality? This Big Three was doomed from the start. They're injury-prone, their play styles clash, and their egos? Let's just say sharing the spotlight isn't their strong suit. The hype blinded everyone, and now the Suns are paying the price. You can't argue with cold, hard stats. The Suns' Big Three have played less than half their games together. And when they do share the court, it's not exactly fireworks. Their offensive ratings are middling, their defense is non-existent, and their rebounding? Don't even ask. Let's talk hustle stats. You know, the numbers that actually win championships. Blocks, weak, steals, minimal, fast break points, pathetic. This team's flashy roster might look good on a billboard, but on the hardwood, it's a disaster. Even worse, their combined salaries leave little room for the Suns to build a decent supporting cast. Translation: they're stuck. Bradley Beal's contract is the cherry on this toxic sundae. How did the Suns think it was a good idea to acquire a player with one of the most restrictive deals in NBA history? Beal's no-trade clause gives him full control, meaning the Suns are handcuffed if they want to move him. Sure, Beal's numbers aren't terrible, but for a guy eating up such a massive chunk of the salary cap, not terrible doesn't cut it. His defensive liabilities, lack of chemistry with Booker and Durant, and inability to stay healthy make him more of a liability than an asset. And now, the Suns are stuck with him. Here's the thing. The era of super teams is over. The league has evolved, and top-heavy rosters just don't work anymore. Teams like the Denver Nuggets and Milwaukee Bucks are proving that depth, chemistry, and smart roster construction are the real keys to success. Phoenix's Big Three, on the other hand, is a relic of a failed philosophy. Their inability to play consistent minutes together, combined with their lack of complementary skills, makes them the antithesis of what a modern contender should look like. It's time to retire the myth that a few stars can carry an entire team. Devin Booker might be the only redeeming quality of the Suns roster, but even he has his limits. As talented as Booker is, he's now being forced to shoulder an unfair burden. He's expected to be the primary scorer, playmaker, and even a defensive anchor at times, all while trying to keep the team afloat. The sad truth: Booker's prime years are being wasted in a flawed system. Unless the Suns find a way to surround him with the right pieces, his legacy could suffer. And that's a tragedy for one of the NBA's brightest stars. Kevin Durant is one of the greatest players of all time, but let's face it, his best years are behind him. Injuries have taken a toll, and while he still shows flashes of brilliance, he's no longer the dominant force he once was. Durant's presence on this Suns team feels more like a desperate attempt to stay relevant than a genuine push for a championship. And let's not forget, KD's decision to join yet another super team hasn't exactly helped his legacy. Critics are quick to point out that Durant's championships came with the Golden State Warriors, a team that didn't need him to win. Now he's part of a Suns experiment that's failing spectacularly. So what's next for the Suns? Honestly, not much. Their cap situation is a mess, their core players are aging and injury-prone, and their lack of depth is glaring. Unless they pull off a miracle trade, this team isn't winning a championship anytime soon. Bradley Beal's no-trade clause complicates things even further. The Suns can't rebuild, they can't retool, and they can't compete. They're stuck in NBA purgatory, and it's hard to see a way out. Suns fans had high hopes for this team, and who can blame them? On paper, this roster looked like a contender, but the reality has been a nightmare. The lack of effort, the constant injuries, and the poor management have left fans feeling betrayed.
It's tough to stop, I think that's what, that's what the offense does.
The Suns front office promised a dynasty, but what they delivered was a disaster. And now the fans are the ones paying the price, both emotionally and financially. Tickets aren't cheap, and watching this team implode is hardly worth the investment. If there's one takeaway from the Suns debacle, it's this. Super teams are a gamble, and more often than not, they fail. The NBA's future belongs to well-balanced rosters, smart drafting, and cohesive team play. Teams that ignore these principles do so at their own peril. As the Suns continue to struggle, one can't help but wonder, what could they have accomplished with a different approach? Unfortunately, we'll never know. But one thing is certain, this super team will be remembered for all the wrong reasons.